Hi everyone, let's read a new topic of Aeon with me. Let's start with We Are Not Empty. So today Aeon is We Are Not Empty. So what is it's all about? It's about the concept of the atomic void is one of the most repeated mistake in popular science. Molecules are packed with stuff. So it is written by the Mario Barbati is a theoretical chemist and physicist researching light and molecules interaction. He is professor of chemistry at Aix-Marseille University in France and a senior member of Institut Universitaire de France. So let's read the first passage of this particular essay. The camera zooms in, in on the person's arm to reveal the cells. Then a cell nucleus, a DNA strand grows on the screen. The camera focuses on a single atom within the strand, dives into a frenetic cloud of rocketing particles, crosses it and leaves us in oppressive darkness and initially imperceptible tiny dot growth smoothly, revealing the atomic nucleus. The narrator lectures that the nucleus of an atom is 10 of thousands of times smaller than the atom itself, and poetically concluded that we are made from emptiness. So this passage is talking about these cells, what the cells contains, which contains atoms, and atoms are emptiness. Means atoms are so tiny that our we can say that our body is made up of emptiness. So the title of this passage is Brief Description about atom. So we can take this, the narrator lecture that the nucleus of an atom is tens of thousands of times smaller than the atom itself, and the poetically conclude we are made up of body too. So it's this passage is saying that our body is made up of atoms which contains tens of thousands of times smaller than atoms nucleus, which contain nucleus with size of 10 or thousands smaller than the atom itself. So it says that our body is made up of emptiness. Let's moving towards the next passage. How often have you seen such a scene or read something equivalent to it in popular science? I'm sure plenty. If you're fans of this genre like me, however, the narrative is wrong. Atomic nuclei in a molecule are not tiny dots, and there are not empty space within the atom. So here author is saying uh, that like author, there are like author, many of us are the fan of the science genre, articles, novels, or some readings. So author is saying that if you're the fan like him, you must know that the atom nuclei is a molecule and not a tiny dot, and they are not the empty space within the atom. So let's moving towards the next species, which is quite, this is the species whole. The empty atom picture is likely the most repeated mistake in popular science. It is unclear who created this myth, but it is sure that Carl Sagan, in his classic TV series Cosmo 1980, was crucial in popularizing it. After wondering how small the nuclei are compared with the atom, Sagan concluded, most of the mass of an atom is in its nucleus. The electrons are by comparison just clouds of moving fluff. Atoms are mainly empty space. Matter is composed chiefly of nothing. I still remember how deeply this word spoke to me when I heard them as a kid in the early 1980s. Today, as a professional theoretical chemist, I know that Sagan's statement failed to recognize some fundamental features of atom and molecules. So, this passage is talking about facts about atom from the TV series Cosmos. So, sorry, it's not facts, it's myths about atom from the series Cosmos. So, we can take this line. What is the myths? That most of the mass of an atom is in its nucleus. The electrons are by comparison just clouds of moving fluff. Atoms are mainly empty space. Matter is composed chiefly of nothing. So this is the statement given by the Carl Sagan in the series Cosmos, which aired in 1980. But author is saying that now author as a professional theoretical chemist saying that Sagan's statement fails to recognize some fundamental features of atoms and molecules. So author is saying Sagan's statement failed to recognize some fundamental features of an atom and molecules. So let's moving toward the next basis. Yet, this reasoning is still influential. While preparing this essay, I ran a poll on Twitter asking whether people agree with Sagan's quote above. Of the 180 voters, 43% answers that they mostly agreed and 20% fully agreed. Google atom empty space and you will find tens of essays, blog posts and YouTube videos concluding that atoms are 99.9% empty space. To be fair, you will also find a reasonable share of articles debunking the idea. So in this passage, author is talking about, created a poll on Twitter about is the people's whether the people are agree with Sagan's quote which is mentioned in the above passage or not. So author is just describing here the results of his poll, and but still author says that still there is 99.9% people agree, or the evidences articles are there to prove that the atoms have empty space. Let's moving towards the next basis. Sorry. Misconceptions feeding the idea of the empty atom can be dismantled by carefully interpreting quantum theory, which describes the physics of molecules, atoms, and subatomic particles. According to the quantum theory, the building blocks of matter, like electron, nuclei, and the molecules they form, can be portrayed either as a wave of particles or particles. leave them to evolve by themselves without human interference. And they act like a delocalized waves in the shape of continuous cloud. On the other hand, when we attempt to observe these systems, they appear to be a localized particle, something like bullets in the classical realm. But accepting the quantum predictions that nuclear electron fill space as a continuous cloud has a daring conceptual price. It implies that these particles do not vibrate, spin, or orbit. They inhabited motionlessly microcosmos where the time only occasionally play a role. So, in this passage, author is talking about the functioning of uh, the quantum theory. So, we can the title of this passage is "What Quantum Theory Tells About Atom." So, we can take this electron, nuclei, and molecules. They form can be portrayed either as a waves or particles. Elect, uh, Electrons, nuclei, and molecules form either a wave or particles. And this line is also important. And particle, and we can add from the above line, which learns to evolve by themselves without human interference. They act like delocalized waves in the shape of continuous clouds. And what the quantum theory says that quantum theory implies that these particles do not vibrate, sprint, or orbit. They inhabit a motionless microcosmos where the time only occasionally play a role. So let's moving toward the next species. Most problems surrounding the description of the submolecule world come from the frustrated attempt to reconcile conflicting picture of waves and particles, leaving us with inconsistent chimeras such as particles like nuclei surrounded by waves like electrons. This image doesn't capture quantum theory's predictions. To compensate, our conceptual reconstructions of matter at the submolecule level should consistently describe how nuclei and electrons behave when not observed, like the proverbial sounds of tree falling in the forest without anyone around. So this passage is talking about the problem which is described by submolecule. So the title of this passage is Problems Surrounded by Description of Submolecular World. So what we can take from here? Reconcile conflicting picture of waves and particles, leaving with inconsistent chimeras such as a particle like nuclei surrounding wave like electrons. We can take this line as it is. First, that is reconcile conflicting pictures of waves and particles, leaving us with inconsistent chimeras such as particle-like nuclei surrounded by wave-like electrons. And we can take something from here. This image doesn't capture quantum theory's predictions. To compensate our conceptual reconstruction of matter at the submolecular level should consistently describe how nuclei and electron behave when not observed, like the proverbial sound of a tree falling in the forest without anyone around. So, saying that the ever mentioned statement is it's not aligned with the quantum theory predictions. It says that to compensate our conceptual reconstruction of matter at the submolecular level should consistently describe how nuclear and electron behave when not observed. So we can take this whole line, this whole as it is. That ever theory is not aligned with the quantum theory prediction, which says to compensate our conceptual reconstructions of matter at the submolecular level should consistently describe how nuclei and electrons behave when not observed. Let's moving forward to the next species. Here's a primer on how to think of the fundamental components of matter. A molecule is a stable collection of nuclei and electrons. If the collection contains a single nucleus, it is called an atom. Electrons are elementary particles with no internal structure and a negative electric charge. On the other hand, each nucleus is a combined system composed of several protons and roughly equal number of neutrons. Each protons and neutrons is 1836 times more massive than an electron. The proton has a positive charges of the same magnitude as an electron negative charges, while neutrons, as their name hint, have no electric charge. Usually, but not necessarily, the total number of protons in a molecule equals the number of electrons, making molecules electrically neutral. So here in this passage, author is describing the difference between the electron, neutron, and protons. So it's the title of this passage is differentiation between the electrons, neutrons, and protons. So firstly, it's written about electrons. What is electrons? Electrons are elementary particles with no internal structure and a negative electric charge, which is nucleus is combined system composed of several protons and roughly equal of neutrons. I think all the lines are here. We can take as an important because it seems like I'm reading my chemistry chapters. I hope many of you just realize the same as me. That each proton and neutrons is 1836 times more massive than an electron. So let's talking about what is a proton. So the proton has a positive charge of the same magnitude as an electron's negative charge, while neutron, as their name hints, have no electric charges. But not necessarily the total number of protons in a molecule is equal to the number of electrons, making the nucleus electrically neutral. Okay, so it's all the whole science terms are using. So let's moving toward the next species. The interior of the protons and neutron is likely the most complex place in the universe. I like to consider each of them a hot soup of three permanent elementary particles known as quark boiling along inside, with an uncountable number of virtual quark popping into existence and disappearing among almost immediately. Other elementary particles called gluon hold the soup within a pot of 0.9 femtometers radius. A femtometer, abbreviate FM, is a convenient scale that measures a system tens of thousands of times smaller than an atom, corresponding of 10 to the power minus 15 m. We must juxtapose 1 trillion femtometer to make 1 millimeter. I'm already apologize if I'm spelling just any word, speak any, oh, sorry, I just spell any words not correctly. I'm not good at this science stuff, so I apologize. So here author is describing about the gluons, which is a 0.9 femtometers smaller, means tens of thousands times smaller than an atom. Earlier I thought only atom is the smallest particles, but now there is a new terms. So here this author is talking about gluon. So this whole passage is important. We can take this whole passage as it is from this particular passage. That electrical particle called gluon hold a soup within a pot of 0.9 ferrometer radius, and it is a whole descriptions we are taking as it is. So let's moving toward the another series of this article. Instead of localized bullet in empty space, matter delocalized into continuous quantum cloud. So let's see what this series holds. So let's moving toward the first passage of this series. Particles with the same electric charge sign repel each other. So additional interactions are required to hold protons close packed in nucleus. This interaction arises from quark and anti-quark pair called pions that constantly spill out of each proton and neutron to be absorbed by another such particles nearby. The energy exchange in this transfer is big enough to compensate for electric repulsion between protons and thus bind together protons and neutrons, storing the immense energy that may be released in nuclear fusion process. So it's describing about how the nuclear fusion process occurs. So title this particular process is how nuclear fusions occurs. Interactions are required to hold protons close to the packed-in nucleus, which resulting arise from quark and anti-quark pair point that constantly spill out each proton and neutron to absorb by another such particle nearby. So we can take all as it is. The energy transfer is big enough to compensate the electric repulsions between. We can take whole passage as it is from starting. We can write it as for to hold proton close packed with the nucleus, which result in arise from the quark and anti-quark pairs called pions that constantly spill out each proton and neutron to be absorbed by another such particles transfer are big enough to compensate for electric repulsion between the protons and thus bind together proton and neutron, storing the immense energy that may be released in nuclear fission process. So this is all about the species. Let's moving toward the next one. However, the extreme short lifetime of the pions limits how far proton and neutron may be from each other, curving the nucleus size of 1 to 10 fm radius. Thus, from a particle perspective, the nucleus is tiny compared with an atom. A neutron nucleus composed of 7 protons and 7 neutrons has a radius of about 3 fm. In contrast, nitrogen's atomic radius is 1,79,000 atoms. At the scale of atom and molecules, nuclei are no more than heavy, point-like positive charges without any apparent internal structure. So are the electrons. They are just light point-like negative charges. So this passage is talking about the proton and neutrons. Protons and neutrons containing the nucleus, at what amount, the size, the nucleus, the relationship between the nucleus through proton and neutron. So, firstly we can take for proton, how the proton neutron formed by nucleus. This is the title of this thesis. So, firstly, short time the pion limits how far proton form each other, curving the nucleus size, and the nucleus is tiny compared with an atom. Nitrogen nucleus composed 7 protons and 7 neutrons has a radius of in this. Above is talking about pion. This line is talking about nitrogen nucleus. And this one is talking about the nitrogen's atomic radius. Okay, let's moving toward the next species. If atoms and molecules remain a collection of point-like particles, they would be mostly empty space. But at their size scale, they must be described by quantum theory, and this theory predicts that the wave-like pictures predominate until a measurement disturbs it. Instead of localized bullets in empty space, matters delocalize into continuous quantum clouds. So here author is talking about that atom and molecules remain a collection of the point-like particles. They would mostly empty spaces, but their size scales they must be which is described. Author is saying that that the collections of point-like particles which present in atom and nucleus which create empty space. But according to the quantum theory, they predict that the waves-like picture predominate until the measurement disturb it. So if the measurement is not disturbed, it's considered it as an empty space. But if the measurement is changed, then it is not considered as empty space, which is known as a quantum cloud. So let's moving toward the next species. Matter is fundamentally quantum. Molecules cannot be assembled under the rules of classical physics. The classical electrical interaction between a nuclei and electrons are insufficient to build a stable molecules. Due to the electric attraction of the charges of opposite sign, the negatively charged electron would quickly spiral towards the positively charged nuclei and glue to them. The resulting combined particle with no net charge would fly apart, preventing any molecules from forming. So it's talking about how the molecules are formed and how it works. Molecules that the classical electrical interactions between the nuclei and electrons are insufficient to stable molecules. So, how molecules are not formed? This passage is talking about how molecules are not formed. So, firstly, said the classical electrical interaction between the nuclei and electrons are insufficient to build stable molecules. So, due to the electric attraction of the charge of opposite sign, the negative charge electron would quickly spiral toward the positive charge and nuclei and glue to them, the combining particles with no net charge would fly apart and preventing any molecules to be formed. So, let's end our reading here itself. See you guys. Let's resume the other rest of the articles in the next video. Thank you.